What's going on, guys? It's Matt with the FF Mediators, the Faceoff Sports Network. Coming at you live this time with a Dynasty Rookie ADP video. We're going to pull up Dynasty Data Lab, take a look at their rookie ADP information, see who's rising, see who's falling, and talk about what might just happen in 2 weeks to kind of shift this up and maybe make some players fall some more or even rise up these boards. We're finally getting close to where we're going to have landing spots. I know I've got a bunch of drafts that kick off Sunday after the NFL draft. I'm sure you do too. So let's kind of walk through some scenarios and what we need to be prepared for with our teams. I'm going to go position by position and then talk about some strategy too. So let's get the board up here, kind of get started. You'll see this first round here. It's been pretty consistent, I'd say, since we kind of entered the offseason. There's a few names that have kind of risen a little bit, a few names falling out. But for the most part, let's just go position by position. Let's start with the running backs because that's the biggest position in this class. There's more running backs on this board than there are any other position, and rightfully so. There was a ton of talent in this class and a ton of people to be excited about. Now, Ashton Genty at the 101, I don't see a world where that changes anything. Obviously, the RB2 of this class probably will fall in this 102, 103 range. You could argue a quarterback in superflex leagues. Kind of just depends on what you need to do. But just looking at the running backs, we see Omarion Hampton has kind of been consistently towards the front end of this first round for the last month or so. Same with Travion Henderson, kind of bounced around in the middle of the first round. But the biggest thing with these running backs is just going to be the capital that's invested in them. If we see 3 first-round running backs, then we're going to see those guys probably occupy 3 of the first 6 picks. That would be my guess. If we see, 2 running backs in the first, or even just 1 running back in the first, but 4 or 5 in the second and third round with decent landing spots, you're probably looking at more of running backs occupying the second half of this first round. You're going to have teams that are going to chase the opportunity, and certainly there's teams that I will as well. But when it comes down to it, we need to see what the NFL is going to invest in these players and then make our decisions. Because what I've been telling people is if you're a team and you're holding on to, say, the 110, 111, or 112, and you're in need of a running back, and situation 1 happens where, say, we get 3 guys in the first and 2 or 3 guys in the second, those guys are going to eat up spots in the first 9 picks. That's just how I feel because they're going to come flying off the boards. We get trigger happy with that position already because there's so many people that are in committees or maybe not necessarily established enough to know that you're going to have that role going forward. But if these guys get first run capital, it's wheels up. So you need to be prepared that if you're a running back needy team and you're relying on getting one at this late end first range, you need to be ready to move up or accept taking a shot on a guy who maybe took a little bit of a fall in the draft or didn't necessarily get the best landing spot. I do think there's a world where Travion could jump Omarion Hampton, or Omarion Hampton could really just sit there and remain the RB2 of this class. Judkins is kind of the wild card. How high will he go? And then we have Caleb Johnson, who's kind of been falling here recently, not necessarily ADP wise, but just kind of in the views of this class. A lot of people early on thought he might be the RB2 or RB3 of the class, and now he's kind of set himself in stone at that, RB4, 5, 6 range of the class. And again, a lot of this is going to be dependent on the capital that's invested in these guys. But I think that once we get to the second round, there's going to be a lot of guys you want to take shots on. Cam Scadaboo is really interesting. His ADP kind of was going up there for a little while, then slowed down here recently. We had his 40 time, which was pretty impressive, running in the 4-5 range. So he's somebody I'd be interested in adding to my team. If you go watch his highlights, man, there's a lot of times he gets the ball in his hand and you just think there's no way he should get positive yards and somehow he'll score. He's a really, really good football player. I don't think he's got necessarily that breakaway speed or maybe the NFL big play ability, but he's definitely going to have chunk yardage and just kind of wear and tear on some of these teams just because he's got that ability to just really run downhill. And on top of that, he's a fantastic receiver too. So there's a lot to like about his profile. You've got Devin Neal, who's another well-rounded back. Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee is going to be another speedster. Ollie Gordon, another interesting case. Not quite the 2024 season, but 2023, he was spectacular at Oklahoma State. And then Brayshaul Tootin out of Virginia Tech, who kind of blew away everyone at the 40, having the fastest time. He's a track guy. There's a lot to like in his profile. He looks like he could be a good back. And then there's some names in the third round, too, that I think we could see climb up boards. I mean, you've got DJ Giddens here, who's a well-rounded back from Kansas State, kind of just floating around the back of the second round, third round. just kind of trying to find where he might end up in the NFL draft. And on top of that, another name that's not on this list is Taj Brooks, running back out of Texas Tech. Fantastic profile. One of two running backs in the country to have 100 rushing yards in every single game. The other one was Ashton Genty. He has multiple 1,000-yard seasons in a row. Good out of the backfield, played a ton at Texas Tech, so he's a really experienced. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good pro. Maybe not necessarily a high-profile guy, but definitely going to be a guy that kind of sticks around the league for a while in my eyes. But when we look at these running backs, like I said, you just need to be prepared to kind of see some of these guys trickle up depending on if they get that capital. And then in the second and third round is kind of where we can take those shots to go and get guys that maybe fell in some good landing spots or maybe went later in the NFL draft. But there's a lot to like about this running back class, and I'm excited to see where they end up. But let's jump to the wide receivers now. Let's jump to those. Let's talk about, we got Ted McMillan, who's kicking off as most people's wide receiver one. Been pretty consistent in his draft capital. I don't think we'll see any surprises there come draft night. He's going to be a first round guy. A few people have mocked him in the second round, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And then we've got the two slot guys here who are currently sitting at 9 and 10 respectively. Now these are the two that could kind of shift things up. There's a little bit of a trend with these guys pushing towards being drafted in the second round of the NFL draft on night 2. I think Igbuka will probably be drafted night 1. He's one of the most polished wide receivers in this class. He's pro ready. He's got all the accolades you could want out of Ohio State. He's just going to come in and be a great slot for whoever drafts him. And his capital has been pretty consistent over the last month. Now, Luther Burden, on the other hand, is someone who had great production in 2023, but 2024 was not quite his year. You could say that might have been due to some quarterback play from Cook at Missouri, but for the most part, he's kind of a gadgety guy, has a lot of manufactured touches. There's some current concerns about effort, maybe the route tree being fully developed, but there's one thing you cannot deny. He is athletic as crap, and he can make people miss. So if you get the ball to him in space, he's certainly a big play waiting to happen. And I think whoever gets him is going to try and get him in as much space as possible, lots of motion, just get him out and running and kind of let him make people miss and just look silly out there in space. So he's definitely a wide receiver to keep your eyes on. But I do think there's a possibility he could fall to round 2 on the actual NFL draft and maybe find his way somewhere between the 112 and the 201, somewhere around there. And you shouldn't freak out about that too much because remember who was there last year. Brian Thomas was at the back end of the first. Ladd McConkey was at the back end of the first, start of the second. So you can still get guys that can impact your team. Now, don't necessarily bank on them being surefire studs because let's talk about the next two wide receivers here too. Matthew Golden here at 14 overall. His ADP slowly trickling up as before March 12th here, as you can see. He was kind of towards the back end of the second. For me, he's my wide receiver one of this class. I absolutely love his profile. The analytics and the stats aren't necessarily there, but if you go watch the tape, the guy is twitchy. He is fast. He can make people miss. He's got fantastic hands. He's got a heck of a route tree. The guy's going to be a double move monster. Like, I'm really excited to see where he can end up. And I think there's a world where he could be the first wide receiver drafted in this class on the actual NFL draft. And if that's the case, he's going to be shooting somewhere up here in the top 7 or 8 picks. In my mind, I just don't see how you could pass him. If he falls to the back end of the first round and gets drafted to a nice landing spot, say maybe like the Texans, same thing. He's going to go up draft boards. He's a really good player, and I think whoever gets him is getting a guy that's got a ton of talent. I think his best football is ahead of him. Let's just go ahead and jump to the next guy, and let's talk about Trey Harris. And that's another wide receiver I really, really liked. Cut short at Ole Miss this past season, only played 8 games, was still an SEC first-team wide receiver, despite only playing 8 games. He's a fantastic player, man. You could just watch him, and he can do everything. Limited route tree at Ole Miss, so that's going to kind of knock him down in some people's minds, but that doesn't scare me. When you throw on the tape, he has all sorts of releases and moves that he can put on people. He's got really reliable hands. He finds a way to break away and kind of score on plays that he shouldn't necessarily score on. When I watched this tape, I got a lot of Amari Cooper vibes from him, and I haven't really seen anybody else comp him to Amari. Not quite the same size, but man, they just look similar with how they move. And then when we get to the back half of the second round, You've got Jaden Higgins, Io Manor, Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond is interesting. There's some legal questions right now that are out there, but we're not going to go into those too much. And then Jaden Higgins is a guy that could get some early second round capital. A lot of people have been mocking him going in the second round of the NFL draft. And I think that's only going to help his case and kind of have him move up draft boards. I mean, he was in the third round, now at the 207. So he's definitely been rising here recently. But when you kind of think about where he could go, I mean, Green Bay has said vocally, and even Josh Jacobs has come out and said it, that they're looking for that wide receiver to be the X for them. Christian Watson's coming off the torn ACL. So I think Jaden Higgins would be a really interesting guy to kind of fill that role. And it's interesting to me, too, because if you look at the next wide receivers, there's someone that I think should be right in this range, and that's Jalen Noel, fellow teammate of Jaden Higgins, actually from Iowa State. That guy is an absolute stud. He's another slot wide receiver, but he can do absolutely everything. If you go pull his combine, he was top 3 in basically everything. He's really, really athletic, solid hands, had over 1,000 yards, great touchdown production. He's going to be a really good player in the NFL, and whoever drafts him is kind of going to get a steal. So I could see him trickling up into the second round as well. Then obviously you've got Jack Betch. There's not much of a better story out there than Jack Betch. The guy is tough as nails, heck of a player. Coach's guy Xavier Restrepo on here, all-time leading receiver from Miami. Definitely someone to keep an eye on. He's a slot merchant. So lots of slot guys in this draft. There's a few X's out there. You know, Io Manor is another big profile wide receiver. Kind of interesting production as a freshman at Stanford. This past season was okay. If you put on his tape against Colorado, he absolutely destroyed Travis Hunter. He had something like 200 some yards, a couple touchdowns. He was fantastic in that game. And then in the fourth round in here, you've got Savion Williams. That's a name to keep your eyes on. Currently being drafted in the fourth round. You see his ADP has been consistently down there. He is an athletic specimen. And here's the thing. He's going to be comped by a lot of people to QJ from the Chargers. And, you know, I hate to draw that comparison because there are question marks with his hands. But his athletic profile is not really beat by a lot of people. I mean, he's got a little bit of Debo in him, a little bit of QJ in him where he's just super athletic and he can just get the ball and really just find ways to make plays and score. But it's really just the question marks about his route tree and hands that are kind of, you know, hinder his profile a little bit. And when we see some of these NFL teams, a lot of them really have him pretty high on their draft boards. I mean, there's rumors of him being a possible first round pick or being taken on day 2 in the second round. So he's someone to keep an eye on because if he gets that capital, he's going to shoot up draft boards. That's just what we know. And then there's a few other guys on here. Tez Johnson, obviously, he's a smaller wide receiver from Oregon. Ty Felton, fantastic production from Maryland. Really good player. He's going to have a little bit of sneaky athleticism to him. Not necessarily that's going to blow you away or make big plays, but he was the leading receiver from the Big Ten this past season, so definitely a good player. And then Nick Nash on there as well. So the wide receiver class is a little bit sketchy this year, in my opinion. It's deeper, but not necessarily loaded with stars and studs. The one name we did not mention is Travis Hunter. And I'll just go ahead and say it. If he plays wide receiver, which I think he will, he's the wide receiver 1 of this class. I know I said Matthew Golden before, but Travis Hunter's just got the asterisk next to his name, just given all the circumstances. So if he plays wide receiver, you will see him drafted somewhere at the 102, 103, 104 range. And he should be rightfully drafted there. My advice for people who aren't really sure of what to do with him, and let's say we don't necessarily get the best clarity and you're drafting right after the NFL draft, if you take a shot on him in the back end of the first round, I'm not going to hate it. There's going to be a lot of teams where I do that if he falls there, just because he's so athletic and he's such a good player. I'm going to chase that profile. So it's something to monitor and keep in mind when you're drafting, because you got to know your team. You got to know if you can take that risk. If you're coming off a title run and you're looking to add a depth piece and maybe get a guy who could possibly be a future star in this league like Travis Hunter, because he's got elite ball skills, man. Like, you cannot deny it. The guy has skill. And if you can get him in the back end of the first round, it's a good pick. It's worth it. It's worth the risk to see what he can do. And I've said this several times. If you knew today that he was going to be out there for 30 snaps and he was going to get guaranteed, 3 or 4 manufactured touches and then 3 or 4 just general targets, would you be interested in that? I would. Because if your wide receiver on any given week got 7 to 8 opportunities, you'd be pretty happy. I mean, that's pretty standard for most wide receivers. I mean, certainly it's not necessarily elite, but if you're telling me you can get a guy with that type of athleticism who could be that big of a weapon in an offense, I'm interested. But let's just go ahead and jump to the quarterbacks now. And let's talk about Cam Ward. He's obviously the QB1 of this class. All signs point to him being a Tennessee Titan. He's going to go number one overall. Not much to add. I mean, if you're in a super flex league, you can make an argument that he could be at that 102 or maybe even the 101. I've had several people ask, what do you do about the 101 if you're a quarterback needy team? It's a tough situation to be in because maybe Ashton Genty doesn't necessarily help you, but everyone wants a piece of Ashton Genty. So my advice to you would be see if you can slide back, and even if you just net something small, it'd be worth just getting another asset while you can go and get that quarterback and kind of move forward with your team. Um, if you can afford to do that, you should. If you can't, I'm not going to fault you too much because what we know is these quarterbacks, if they hit, their value is going to spike and they're going to be well over Ashton Genty. Now, certainly if Genty becomes in and he's the next Saquon Barkley, he'll have, 3 firsts worth of value going into the future, and that's great. But if Cam Ward comes in and, he's the next Patrick Mahomes, not saying he is, then it's the same thing. He'll have 3 firsts and he's a plug and play guy for the next 10 to 15 years. But, that's a lot of ifs and buts, so we won't focus too much on that. But let's just jump to our QB2, and that's going to be Shedeur Sanders, who's kind of fallen here recently. He was at the 106 range, now sitting at the 109, and a lot of this just has to do with where is he going to get drafted? Early on, a lot of us thought that he would be somewhere between the Browns or the Giants in the first 3 picks. Now it seems like he's going to fall out of that. You got the QB issues in New Orleans. Are we going to have Derek Carr playing? It looks like he might not play. So the Saints are suddenly a QB needy team. Kellen Moore is now the head coach. So maybe he goes out and he gets a guy like Shedeur Sanders who can run his offense and kind of be the future of that team. Interesting situation. If he gets that capital, maybe we see him rise up a little bit more. What does that do for Alvin Kamara? What does that do for Chris Olave? Lots of question marks in New Orleans. But let's just pair that with the next quarterback too, and that's going to be Jackson Dart, who it's not going to show here on the ADP page, but prior to the past month, he was well in the second round or even the third round. Jackson Dart is now a guy who's been mocked pretty consistently in the first round and is even getting top 10 pedigree here recently with teams like the Jets. We've got the Saints. Could the Giants or Browns come in to the first round, trade up and go get him? In our first mock that we did, I had him going to the Steelers at 21 overall. People said I was crazy. So here we are, and I think Jackson Dart is going to be a first-round quarterback. It's just a question mark of how early and where will he go. If he is like Shedeur to get first-round capital, and let's say it's top 10, he'll probably go higher than where he is right now and be somewhere in here. I mean, we're just a year out where we saw Michael Penix, obviously a different situation where he was dealing with the Kirk Cousins signings. He kind of fell in that 204 to 207 range in drafts last year. But we saw guys like J.J. McCarthy falling in the middle to the back half of the first. That class last year was just loaded, and I'm not saying that this class is going to be as good or maybe replicate that, but if they get the capital, they're going to shoot up. Now, the one name is Jalen Milroe right here, who's currently sitting at 17th overall. He has risen up a lot. I mean, we're a month out from when he was going at the back end of the second round, and before that, he was in the third or fourth, and now he's at the 205. So in that Michael Penix range of last year. The biggest news for him is going to be he accepted an invitation to the NFL draft in Green Bay. That is important because that is for people who they believe will get drafted in the first round. The NFL does not like to invite people that will sit there and be in the studio and have cameras in front of their face, which makes me think and makes a lot of other people think, because it's a reasonable assumption, that he knows something we all don't know. That one team out there said, hey, if you're still on the board and you're in there in the back of the first round, we are going to come and get you. We're going to trade in and get him. And if someone does that, he's going to shoot up boards. I mean, he's got elite athleticism. There's no quarterback in this class that is faster than him. There might not be a quarterback in the NFL that's faster than him, except for maybe Lamar. But he is a big-time athlete. He's got a huge arm. It's a lot like Anthony Richardson, where he can just chuck it what feels like 1,000 miles. But the biggest question mark for him is going to be, does he have the short game and does he have the intermediate game? Those are major flaws in his in his profile. And it's very evident on tape. And if you go back and watch, he struggled at the Senior Bowl. He struggled at the Combine. And I understand that those aren't the end-all, be-all, but they are factors. And it just supports the glaring hole in his profile. That's something he's going to have to fix. So if he gets drafted with significant capital, say maybe the Steelers at 21, he's going to go a lot higher than here. I don't necessarily love the idea of him being a first-round quarterback because I don't think the talent is necessarily there. I hope he proves me wrong because I'm going to be rooting for him. But it's just one of those things where you have to look at the profile and see what's actually happening with these quarterbacks because I just don't see a world where he's necessarily ready for that role. And a lot of times we see these rushing upside quarterbacks get huge upticks in the rookie drafts and they kind of fly up these draft boards before necessarily they should be. I mean, we are just a few years out from when Trey Lance was the end-all, be-all and was being traded for 3 or 4 first-round picks, and that turned into nothing. Anthony Richardson, the exact same case. I'm not saying that Jalen Milroe is both of those players, but there are a lot of consistent red flags between the 3 of those players. So Jalen Milroe is a guy to keep your eyes on as we approach the NFL draft and kind of see what could happen to him. But let's just round out here with tight ends, guys. Tyler Warren, our tight end one of this class, pretty consistently in that first round. If you're in a tight end premium league, you can make the argument that he should be the 4th overall pick or 5, 6, 7, whatever you want to do. He's a fantastic player. I'm not worried about him at all. I think he's going to get top 15 capital. He'll probably get top 10 capital, and I think it's definitely something that he's worth. The biggest thing for Tyler Warren is, does he find himself in an offense that can produce targets for him? A lot of people have mocked him to the Colts. Not necessarily the best situation, but there's definitely a need there. The Jets are an interesting team. The Panthers are an interesting team. Even possibly the Jags. I know Coach doesn't want to hear that because he's a big Brenton Strange believer. I don't necessarily love it either, but it's a possibility in my eyes. He's a fantastic player, and wherever he goes, he's going to be ready to go. And just because in my eyes, he's a top 5 player in this entire class overall, regardless of position. Colston Loveland is another tight end we've got in the first round here. Again, if this is a tight end premium league, he's definitely going to be gone by this point at the 111. Coming out of Michigan, not necessarily a ton of production, but that's mainly due to the offense there that he was in. But when he did run routes, fantastic target share. He's a fantastic route runner, solid hands. He'll put his hand in the dirt and block. Not necessarily the best blocker of this class, but he's pretty decent in my eyes. He gives effort. Not every player is going to do that. He's just a Michigan man. If he falls to the 201 here, that's a steal. So if you can get a guy like that in the second round, scoop him up. Because I think he's going to get first-round draft capital once this class closes out and we kind of get the landing spots. Colston Loveland's a fantastic player. And there's a good argument to be made that he could be better than Warren. He just needs a little time. He's young. He's got a ton to prove and a ton of upside and a lot of the intangibles that you want to see in a tight end like that. Our tight end 3 here is going to be Elijah Arroyo, another player out of the U. Really interesting profile. Not a ton of production at Miami, but boy, is he athletic. He lit the combine on fire. Fantastic player at the Senior Bowl. When you see him out on tape, it's interesting because he gives a ton of effort. He's got that play against Georgia Tech where he hit a top speed of like 24 miles per hour. The guy can absolutely fly. So he's someone to keep your eye on. He'll be, one of those guys where if he finds his way into a good offense, maybe say like the Bengals or something like that, that'd be an awesome landing spot, and we'll see him jump up into second-round territory, especially if this is a tight end premium league. Harold Fannin here at 28, one of my favorite prospects to watch in this class. There's a deep dive out there here on the Faceoff Sports Network if you want to go pull that up. He's a fantastic player, man. Smaller, not necessarily the size that you want to see for a guy putting his hand in the dirt to block, but when you get him in space, he just makes things happen. Broke a ton of tackles at Bowling Green, set FBS records for tight ends and receptions, yards, broken tackles. The guy was amazing. And if you throw on the 2 biggest games of Bowling Green's year this past season, Texas A&M and Penn State, he dominated. He had over 20 catches, over 200 yards, multiple touchdowns against both those teams. Like, he was fantastic. He's a heck of a player. And when you get him in space, he just finds a way to make things happen. He'll run around people or run over them or run through them and just really make plays. Like, he's a good football player. I love to watch him play, man. I'm rooting for him because he's one of my favorite players. And then let's talk about tight end 5. That's going to be Mason Taylor, another name that has really risen over the last month, going up a whole round. Some people have him being mocked as the tight end 3. I've even seen him mocked as the tight end 2 of this class, which would really, really surprise me. But he is a really good player, son of Jason Taylor. So he's got that NFL pedigree. It's in his blood. But man, if you go watch him at LSU, he did everything. And he did everything pretty well. Not necessarily going to blow you away at any one thing, but he's just good at everything. So that's someone that I think you could see go up on this draft board here in the second round if he gets that capital and kind of change the way we view him. Let's round it out here with the tight ends that are in the fourth round. We've got Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, Gunnar Helm from Texas, and Aronde Gadsden from Syracuse. These are interesting names. Ferguson had a really good combine, ran really well, had the fastest 40, showed a lot of promise there. His tape's pretty solid at Oregon. He just wasn't necessarily asked to do all the things that these other tight ends were asked to do, just because his offense was much better. And Oregon has a lot more playmakers than most other teams. Gunnar Helm is a guy that I think needs a little bit more time. I think he's a bit of a project. The size is there. He's got the ability to put his hand in the dirt. He did get pushed around a little bit when he went up against Georgia, but most people do, so give him a little bit of a pass there. And then finally, Aronde Gadsden, another guy with an NFL pedigree from his dad, coming out of Syracuse, a fantastic player. If you have a chance to go watch the tape, the guy just catches everything. He had an insane amount of targets, an insane amount of catches. Really good production. He's smaller, but he's got the speed. He's got the ability to get open in space, and he has a really good knack for finding zones and just kind of sitting in there and just finding a way to help his quarterback out and be a QB-friendly option as a receiver down the field. And that's really, really valuable when we get to the NFL because we see a lot of these tight ends, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce, obviously Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta, where these guys just find ways to get in space and just kind of sit and then just work with their quarterback to continue to stay open and get the ball in their hands. So he's a guy to kind of watch and see if maybe he gets some surprising capital round 3 or round 4, maybe a good landing spot, and has the ability to compete for a job. He might shoot up some draft boards. But just kind of rounding this out, guys, the main thing I want to really, really emphasize is just you need to know, are you chasing opportunity or are you chasing the best player available? My strategy is always to draft the best player available, and I'll figure it out later. You can trade. If you have a surplus of running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, whatever it is, use that to your advantage. Don't just skip on getting a value pick because you think that you need a wide receiver right now. It is still just April. We have plenty of time to round out your roster. So if you take a guy like, say you're in the middle of the first round here at the 107, 108, if you're at the 107 and Tyler Warren's on the board, you should draft him. Even if you don't necessarily need a tight end, you should draft him and figure it out. Don't go pushing for a guy. Like, say it's like when I was talking about the running backs. Say you're sitting here at the 107 and all these running backs are gone. Judkins, Henderson, Amarian Hampton, Ashton Genty. Let's say they get great capital. Do not reach on a guy like Caleb Johnson just because you think you need a running back. If that's the guy you want and you think it's the best thing for you to do, trade back. Play in tiers. That's the best thing that I can offer you to do is play these players into tiers. Separate them out to what you think the class is and then work within that tier. Be comfortable with whoever is in that tier and just find the player to best fit your roster or that you believe is the best player and then just figure it out from there. Because if you do that, then you're netting value now as opposed to shedding it just to try and fill a need or a hole on your roster. Now, of course, the biggest issue to that is the quarterback position. And a lot of times we feel the need to take quarterbacks because maybe your team doesn't have one. If you're a quarterback away and you need Cam Ward, you do what you got to do. Or if you need a guy like Shador or maybe Jackson Dart or heck, even maybe Jalen Milroe, and you have to take them, I'm not going to fault you too much because you're doing what you got to do to try and win now. But at the end of the day, just go with what your conviction and what your gut is. If your gut tells you to take a guy because you think that they're the next Justin Jefferson or you think they're the next Saquon, then you should do it because you're going to be mad if it hits and you didn't take that player. So that's the best advice I can give you. But feel free to comment below what your thoughts are on this ADP, whether you got any questions on some rookies or you need help with making a pick. Let us know in the comments. Come back, find us over on our socials, and we are more than happy to help you and offer our fantasy advice. Be sure to stay tuned. We've got all sorts of content here on the Faceoff Sports Network. You can go back, look at rookie profiles, mock drafts. We've got NFL mocks, all sorts of things you can find. We're live throughout the week, and we're going to continue to be live as we approach the draft and as we approach the NFL season, where we will answer all your fantasy questions. But until next time, we'll catch you then.